Welcome to the EntreEd Talk podcast, the show by educators, for educators, parents, and the community. We're so excited to bring this to you. I'm Toi.
And I'm Laura, and we're excited to uplift best practices in entrepreneurship education.
And don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to the EntreEd Talk podcast on whatever platform you listen. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the EntreEd Talk podcast. We are delighted to be joined today by Dr. Karen Garza. Karen has dedicated her life to bettering educational opportunities for all students. Over the last 3 decades, she has served in several roles, including superintendent and chief academic officer. In December 2016, Karen joined Battelle for Kids as the organization's president and CEO. Karen served as a superintendent of the Fairfax County Public School System, the 10th largest school division in the United States, serving a diverse student population of more than 186,000 students from 2013 to 16. She was the first woman superintendent in the school system's history. Awesome. As a veteran educator, Karen came to Fairfax County Public Schools from Lubbock, Texas, where she served as superintendent of Lubbock Independent School District from 2009 to 2013. She also served as chief academic officer for the Houston Independent School District, where she was responsible for the learning of more than 200,000 students and the management and success of more than 300 schools. I can't wait to talk more about that. That's a lot. Under Karen's leadership, Battelle for Kids provides innovative services and solutions that empower teachers, leaders, and school systems to advance educational equity and opportunity for all students. Welcome, 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 Karen. We're so delighted to have you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
This is excellent. I met Karen at a Battelle conference last year, and I was like a bobblehead in every session, just going, yep, agree. It was awesome. So before we dive into all of that, Karen, can you share a little bit more about your history, your trajectory, and how did you get to where you are today? And it's a big difference from leading those large school systems to Battelle. So I'm interested to hear about the differences and the similarities. So,
well, I've been very fortunate in so many ways. I've had so many unique and really varied experiences that have really shaped my thinking, not only about education for all children, educational equity, around systems thinking and education, and that's come from. I had a role at the state level in Texas. I was actually a registered lobbyist. And ran all the government relations for the Texas Association of School Administrators, which is the superintendent's organization in Texas. And then my experience in Houston, really a very complex system. And, I'm pleased to say that when Abe Savater and I went to Houston, it was the lowest performing urban system in the country. And in 4 years, it was the highest performing. And we had some wonderful things going on in Houston. So that was a great experience. And then had the opportunity to be a superintendent both in Lubbock and in Fairfax. And I will tell you what's interesting about all of that. In 2005, when I was in Houston ISD, we had kind of a daunting challenge, even as one of the largest systems in the United States. We didn't have the internal capacity to respond to that challenge. And so I did some research, and I learned about Battelle for Kids in Columbus, Ohio. Never heard of them before. And so we had them come down and meet us in Houston, and that began a long-term relationship that I've maintained with Battelle for Kids in Lubbock when I went to Lubbock, and then also to Fairfax, because I just had such deep respect and admiration for the support they provided us in Houston. And I'm also proud to say that we still have a relationship with Houston all that many years later, and probably through 4 or 5 different superintendents. So, we're really proud here that we, because of the level of trust and the relationship building that we do with school districts, we really take seriously that partnership. We have relationships that go way, way, way back. And so that's something I'm really proud of. And that's what was so appealing. I loved my job in Fairfax, but when this opportunity presented itself, it was kind of one of those things that it was hard to turn down, because kind of once in a lifetime opportunity. I hated leaving Fairfax, but certainly left it in good hands, and we're doing some cool things here at Battelle for Kids.
You use the word equity, Karen, and I love that. I think, first of all, I'm daunted by the numbers of schools that you have managed, and I'm thinking 300. You barely get to them. You can't get to them one in a year. How do you accomplish that? How do you tell us a little bit more about your leadership style and how you manage such an incredibly large systems, both in Fairfax County and in Houston?
When I went to Fairfax, the 10th largest school system in the United States, I was there only 2 weeks, and I had a board member at a meeting say, Karen, I'm just amazed at how quickly you got a handle on what the challenges are here. And I had to be honest with him. I said, hey, I have to tell you, it's not because I'm a genius or anything. It's because, fundamentally, the challenges are the same everywhere. They really are. It's just the scale of those changes that make it different, and some cases much more complex, right? The challenges that our educators face in dealing with the diverse challenges and needs of the students they have in their classrooms, those are the same kind of everywhere. And it's just a matter of thinking about, you have to be really a strong systems thinker and understand how this decision or this change will impact or ripple through an entire system. I will tell you that's, I think, the fundamental key to why we were successful both in Houston and Lubbock and in Fairfax is you really have to think about, your coherence, systems coherence. How do you create conditions so that every student in your system has an equally excellent education? It may not all look the same. That's really important, I believe. And you have to bring your teams along with you. You have to have ways to triangulate and check that your system is doing all the things that you want it to do. And I think coherence and clarity, particularly in large systems, there's lots of mixed messages, lots of, from kind of people on the front line, it feels very discombobulated. Who's in charge? What are we doing today? That's, what happened to what we were doing last month? And so you really have to look and really use ways of creating clarity for educators throughout the system. And I think at the same time, when you do that, you create this kind of, a more clear purpose where everyone's working together. And so it's, and that takes, things like, I've used lots and lots of different communications tools, kind of like your, one-page theory of action document, so people have clarity about what the priorities are, and then spend a lot of additional time and effort in really making sure that people have the capacity and support to execute on that strategy, plan, and vision.
Wow. Yeah, amazing.
I hope that answered your question.
I know you did.
That question alone we could spend the whole time on, honestly.
Yes, on equity, coherence, clarity.
I'll tell you that I don't consider myself an expert. I just have learned, I've been around the block a few times, and so I've learned some things just from experience that I believe are fundamental to this work. And so in our work with school systems, we really focus on the superintendent and his or her leadership team. And it doesn't mean the other roles are not important. They are very important. But in order to create conditions where the entire system, from an equity perspective, coherency perspective, and just a school system functioning at optimal levels, you have to have a strategy at the highest levels, and it has to be a priority of that leadership team and that board. And so we work a lot on systems thinking, because I can tell you that a lot of educators are not, their preparation didn't necessarily prepare them for kind of a systems thinking approach. And I'll say I think that's led to some places a lot of cynicism on part of educators, because we haven't had a coherent strategy. And so when you don't have that, it really dramatically impacts people on the front lines.
That's so apropos now, and it's amazing, because we see that too in our work, that kind of that top-down approach is the only way that we can really affect systems change. And when we go into school systems where we can get the superintendent to understand what we're trying to do, and it's easy. It makes it not easy, but we know it's going to happen, and it's going to be a good implementation. So we've seen that probably on a smaller level than what you're used to dealing with, but the same type of thing.
But it applies everywhere, doesn't it? And the top down doesn't have to be at the exclusion of any voice at the classroom level or at the school level. So it's not a an or situation. It's certainly an and. You have to have both of those parts working together, but in absence of having that clarity and direction and focus at the district level, you never can scale it. I give a lot of credit to classroom teachers who are innovators, give a lot of credit to principals and school-based leaders that are innovators. I give them so much credit, and I certainly, kudos to them. I'm not minimizing what they do. We don't have time to wait for every campus or innovation to begin at classrooms and then scale up. Mm-hmm. We'll be 100 years from now and be in the very same place. So our goal is to accelerate improvement and accelerate impact and scale. And from an Battelle for Kids perspective, we can't do that if we focus on individual classroom teachers or individual principals in absence of a district commitment and focus. And so that's just kind of a nuance I want to make sure that people understand.
Well, that's so true, because you see these amazing educators, but like you said, it's the scalability of it, because you can't clone the some of those teachers and wait for it to kind of spread up. You have to have it's the clear mission, really, I think
absolutely. And for an example, I'm sure a lot of your listeners have had experiences where you've seen a campus that, man, they were, winning every award and doing incredible things for all kids. And then what happens is if that leader or those innovators leave, it just kind of dies on the vine, right? Because there wasn't a system that sustained that. If it's a strong system that you have deep, alignment and coherency, you can move a leader out. You can even move the superintendent out, and it still moves forward, right? And you don't create a churn in educational systems because there's a focus, a direction, and it's consistent and steady and sustained.
That's awesome. To that point, Karen, could you talk about what you're doing? This is neat because I didn't know this before, but you've been on both sides of Battelle, right? So you've been on the receiving end and on the, and on the leadership end. Can you talk a little bit about the organization and some of the cool things that you do, and also how you go into maybe your approach to going into a new school system?
I've been a client of Battelle for Kids for a long, long time, and now I continue to rely upon the great people here at Battelle for Kids as we continue to support school system leaders all across the country. It is different though, right? So now the role is largely influence, which of course there was some of that in a district, but you had the authority to go in and say, we're doing this or we're doing that, right? We are not in a position to dictate any change. So our role is to, first of all, inspire people to this work, create conditions where people really want to create something different, that they're no longer comfortable with the way things have been in education. Those are the people we want to work with. I have no patience for this continued incremental improvement. So a lot of times people will look back at the last year and they'll say, okay, what are we going to tweak from what we did last year? And then we're going to move forward. There's no time for that incrementalism anymore. We have to have fundamental and very deep change in our systems. And so we seek school leaders, superintendents, chief academic officers, school leaders. In some cases, it even starts with a school board member who gets inspired and then brings their superintendent or chief academic officer to the conversation. It occasionally happens that way. So we try to be very clear about what we are trying to accomplish. And if we have alignment, great. But we've also gotten pretty good about saying, I don't think we're aligned. There are lots of other organizations can help you do that. That's not what we do. And so that's taken some discipline as an organization. But I believe that's why we've been relatively successful thus far in this work. But we really focus on vision first and making sure we spend a lot of time on the why, because we oftentimes do not spend enough time on the why. And we work with school system leaders to go out and really deeply engage their community in the conversation, because I believe that's something that we've been missing for some time is we engage the community, but we engage them kind of at arm's length. Hey, we have this project we need your help with, or can you help us Can you donate some computers, or can you do this? But we've really never asked them deeply around, in light of how the world is changing, and we show them all the research around that. We have lots and lots of research around landscape shifts. In light of how this world is changing, this community, what are your dreams and aspirations for the children in your schools? These are your schools, not the school superintendent schools. These are your schools. And what we find is people get so energized about, the school district never asked me that. I never, I learned this for myself in Fairfax. When I went to Fairfax, great school system. Interestingly enough, people didn't realize how much poverty was in the district. We had more children in poverty than all of Washington, all the kids in Washington D.C. public schools. We had almost 50,000 kids in poverty, and people didn't realize that. But the point is, I had business leaders say, because I did a lot of talking with the community. Well, I think the school system's pretty good. I really don't know what they're doing, but I think they're pretty good. All I know is they keep asking us for money. So that was their only frame of reference about the school district. And so I spent over a year just involving the community in how the world has changed, what are the implications for our schools, and what do we want for our kids. And that's where we created the Portrait of a Graduate. Now, fast forward, we've engaged hundreds of school districts in this same kind of approach. Go out and deeply engage with your community. And it creates such positive will and momentum for the kind of work that is fundamentally needed. Because I have found that in absence of having that conversation, people will question, why are you moving the pieces on the puzzle around? Why are you doing that? So start with the why first, and then you can move faster with the changes that you need. So we spend a lot of time on vision with school system leaders, and we provide resources and supports for that. And then we work with them on strategy. How do you take that vision, and how do you make that a reality for every student in your system? So there's a whole piece of work we do around strategy, and strategy is so important. It can't be happenstance, or it will never have any effect on the system. And then we work on the implementation, work on how do you take this work deeply, and how do you equip teachers and school leaders in this work. And then acceleration, which is a big part of our work. We really believe that networks and school system leaders from all across the country that have this collective desire to create a different educational experience for students, you can go so much faster when you can learn from each other. Share resources, get perspectives. Hey, I made this mistake. This is what I learned. And we consider that an accelerator. So we run a national network of about 200 schools called Ed Leader 21. And by the way, when I was in Fairfax, I was their national chair. So I've been involved with them for a long time too. And then we have a fairly robust state network here in Ohio called SOAR. And all of those are about supporting school system leaders and their teams in creating a 21st century educational experience for every child in their system. I'll take a breath and let you all react to that, but I can certainly go on.
Some key words you're talking about, and you're talking about align. That really strikes me. It's so important, I think, that we understand as organizations what we do best. And Toi and I have talked about this a lot. There are so many great places out there that are doing entrepreneurship, but to be able to find your own work in it, and then and say, hey, if we're not the ones, here's another group. And you talked about deeply. I'm impressed by that, because I think, as you said, we can't just implement step by step. We need huge changes. And therefore that word deeply really resonates with me, that you're diving way deeper than we have maybe before, and it's necessary. And then to accelerate it, of course, get the people who want to be on board with you. As you said, you want to look for those who want to be inspired. And so I think all those things, I can see how they work together. You mentioned your Portrait of a Graduate, and you also mentioned your Ed Leader 21. Can you tell us a little bit more about those programs and their goals?
Okay. So Ed Leader 21 is a national network that began in about 2007, and it started with about, 10 superintendents from across the country that said, you know what, we're tired of this almost exclusive focus on state test scores as the driver for education. We want something different. And honestly, it also started with the business community and there's extraordinary amount of research that captures this, the business community saying, hey, what the school systems are producing today are not meeting our workforce needs. Content knowledge is important, but clearly it's insufficient in order for students to be able to navigate this really complex world. And in the business environment, it's also, we're no longer, the economy is no longer focused exclusively on what David Epstein calls the kind learning experiences, where everything's routine and predictable. It's much more wicked, and that's his term, David Epstein's term in the book Range. And I thought that was a really good descriptor of, in today's business environment, there's a lot more, and even now since COVID, I would imagine that's even much more today moving forward, is there's so much unpredictability and nuance in what we're doing. We need young people who are problem solvers, who are innovators, who can take information and apply it to really new and novel situations, who are communicators and collaborators. And the business community has been saying for some time, we don't have people who have those skills. We can teach them the content. Can you cultivate these skills? That's what we need. And so that's how Ed Leader 21 started, is how do we create conditions where school districts come together and we figure this out together? How do we go about creating conditions where the driver's not the test score, the driver is the educational experience? And so that's how Ed Leader 21 started and just kind of grew. And then when I came on board here to Battelle for Kids, I called Ken Kay, who was running Ed Leader 21 at the time. I said, Ken, Battelle for Kids has been in existence since 2001, one of the larger not-for-profits in the country, and working with many, many states and even other countries. I said, taking our expertise, our capacities in an organization with what you all are doing, because they were much smaller, I said, we can really accelerate this work. Let's join forces. And so we joined forces in October of 2017, and we've been getting after it ever since then. And so what we're doing is we took Portrait of a Graduate, and we developed an online platform. If you go to portraitofagraduate.org, you can see there kind of what we call kind of our step-by-step approach. We believe this work is so important. We contract with school districts all across the country as a not-for-profit to support them in developing those. But we were so committed to it, we said, maybe there's school districts that don't have the resources to pay us to help them do it. So we put a free resource out there online. There's even a sketch tool where you can develop your own. We've done extraordinary amount of research and developed, based on the research, what are the key competencies that school districts should consider. But they can add their own. There's all kinds of features in that. And then there's a gallery walk where we have school districts from all places across the United States that will submit their portrait, and there's a gallery walk. So you can see portraits from all across the country in our gallery walk. And so that was one of the things we did. And what's really neat about that is because we have the system, we can actually collect the analytics. So we can know, it's being used in every state in the United States and about 35 other countries, our portraitofagraduate.org website. And we can tell you what are the top 10 competencies that people and organizations continue to pick that are really really appealing to people. And what we find interesting about that, for an example, is empathy is consistently in the top 5 in this last year. Even before COVID, empathy was within the top 5. And I just find that so reassuring that people recognize that is something we've got to do better in cultivating empathy in our young people. And so Portrait of a Graduate is a key piece of our work. And moving forward, we've also developed a Portrait of an Educator, because we have found that school districts, once they complete their Portrait of a Graduate process, very quickly they find, okay, so what they want to ask themselves the question, so what are the implications for the teachers within our system, our educators, those that are charged with executing and delivering on this vision. And I always tell people our Portrait of an Educator is not a deficit model. This is not because teachers have deficits. It's because we're moving the needle. We're now saying that's no longer our vision and direction. We're going this direction. So as leaders, we have a responsibility to support and equip our teachers in a very different way, since we've kind of moved the chairs around. And that's our responsibility. So we have a number of tools around. We have a portrait of a 21st century educational system, which is kind of around our systems analysis, systems thinking. And then we've developed and cultivated a set of kind of exemplars, what we call our Portrait to Practice series.
Wow.
So that's some of the major elements of our work that we've been engaged in for about the last 3 or 4 years.
It's amazing. We do a whole thing around empathy in our main kind of flagship training that we do with teachers, and it's everyone gets that, but helping teachers understand and administrators understand how do I cultivate that in a student is the difficult part, like you said, so it's giving the educators those tools to help figure out how to do that. And especially now it's kind of crazy that anybody is working under that traditional school model, but it still is happening. And I just love everything you're saying and love the, like I said, I had a big like foam finger in your conference going, this is so good. But it's
and one other thing I would add to that is I think we're also learning how important it is to give students voice in all this work. And I find that every time I have an opportunity, and this was even when I was a superintendent, every time I had an opportunity to be in front of young people, we need to listen to them a lot more, because I always walk away very hopeful and optimistic about the future when I talk with kids. And I will tell you, a lot of our kids, they will tell you empathy is really important. They would pick empathy because they recognize the challenges that people bring to the table, that we're all different, and we all need to understand and recognize what everyone brings to the table and recognize those strengths. And so we do a lot around student voice. I could go on forever just about student voice, but we've done a whole piece of work around student-led assessment, which has been wildly successful. It was a 4-year project that was funded by a major grant, and we're continuing that work because we think students having a voice and create conditions where they're reflective learners and have a voice in how they articulate what their learnings are is a really important piece.
I had a daughter and a son both in college, and my daughter talks a lot about what they've had to do with her university and COVID. She's graduating this month. And it's really interesting, the differences. Some professors have taken an amazing ability to engage them. And I think what she is finding is she's frustrated and she wants to be challenged. I think that's what we sometimes don't see in young people. They really do want to step up and be challenged. And like you said, have that voice. And yet some professors are just taking the easy way out and not challenging them during this time, being at home where they could be doing so much more. So.
Yeah, I just got off the phone with, we have an advisory group of about 45 superintendents from across the country that we meet with periodically. And it's interesting because I feel like there's such a, on the one side, the challenge like you described with the professor, we have teachers that are in some cases struggling with almost a dramatic, one day we did it this way, the next day we're doing it in a dramatically different way. And, that's an enormous challenge in a system if teachers aren't well equipped to deliver in this environment. Some people have, it's interesting because you think, what if we had just said no COVID or anything, but hey, we're going to immediately go to an online. I don't know that people would have gotten as far as they have, but some people have just really risen to the challenge and embraced this new reality. And probably to some extent we accelerated teachers kind of embracing online as a part of our educational experience, because there's probably some element of this that will remain moving forward. But we certainly still have challenges in helping teachers take advantage of it and really maximize it. But it's interesting because a couple of the superintendents told me that their students are saying when it's being done well, they feel like they know their teachers better than what they did in the old environment, particularly at the high school level, because they're actually able to talk with them just like what we're doing over Zoom, and maybe had very few opportunities to do too much of that in the traditional setting. And then they've also heard from students feeling like, I feel like I'm not just overwhelmed with just volumes of work. I feel like I'm able to focus more on work. And I think about that. It's kind of interesting, right? Because we have them go through the motions during the day, and then you do your work at home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting. I think there's a lot of lessons learned throughout this COVID experience. And I think we still have a long way to go to supporting our teachers in this environment. But, and I think there's so many positives that can move forward. Although I will tell you, I'm so concerned about how this has exacerbated inequities that already existed and were pretty pronounced before. Very concerned about that.
Yeah, I think we're all just kind of going, we don't know. We don't know what happens next and what the fallout of all of this is going to be. But I always struggle, and I've shared this on our podcast before. At some point, someone's going to get angry with me probably, but Laura and I work with teachers all over the country, and we see these amazing things happening, even in the most unlikely places. And I mean, we have teachers that are, there's a teacher in her bathtub with a dry erase marker filming on an iPhone to get information to kids. That's unbelievably awesome. But then I'm dealing with my personal school system that's just not happening. We've had a little bit of communication, but it's just not happening. and my heart is breaking for my own children. And I'm going, at least they have me, not that I'm but I have some strategies at least. And there's a lot of parents that don't, and are just really left in the dark right now. And it's really sad, but like we see.
That's what, I was telling a superintendent the other day that I was talking with, in these times, you ask yourselves, why are the governors on TV every day? Why is the president on TV every day? Because at times of crisis, you need to over-communicate. That means you need to be over-communicating, and so do your teachers, right? So whatever you think may be too much is probably not enough. You need to show them that you're on it, and I'm learning from superintendents all across the country that are, doing FaceTime Live every day or doing videos every day, making sure that parents are really well informed. But, so some school districts, I think, have really risen to the challenge and done extraordinarily well in this environment. I think others have struggled with the systems and the readiness, just the equipment, the Wi-Fi connectivity. It's a challenge for many. So I wish I had a crystal ball. That's what I keep telling people. My crystal ball is not working right now. So the lack of some predictability about the future is just makes it so difficult.
Yeah, you can't tell anybody. You can't say, okay, in 3 weeks it'll be fine. Just hang in there. Who knows? It's so crazy. But will we have school? Starting September 1 or whatever that date is, beginning of September or August. Who knows? Some people don't think so, and other people think we will, but it'll look very different. And I hope, like I'm sure you do too, that some out of this, some moving of that needle happens where, we have been thrown into the deep end of the pool, so to speak. And my heart goes out to all the teachers that are trying to do anything that they can do right now, and the administrators and the superintendents. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be in charge of 300 schools right now, Karen. It would be very difficult.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, since I have the microphone, this is not the time to be cutting resources to school districts. The fact that they're all trying very, very hard to get devices in the hands of every student. Wi-Fi, in fact, to some extent, they need more resources, to get Wi-Fi, connectivity to every student. But even then, the conditions in every household are different. Even if you have a device and you have Wi-Fi, are the conditions within your home environment conducive for continued learning? So there's so many unique challenges. I think moving forward, school districts are going to have to have school for some kids, and then have online options for others. Can you imagine the staffing that's going to be required for something like that? And the need to invest in our teachers and support them and learning to equip themselves to really support learning in this environment. So it really scares me, the thought that so many states are now cutting education funding. I think now is definitely not the time to do that, right when there's so much need for additional resource. And then finally, I would say one more thing, and that is, people say, systems thinkers, Peter Senge and other people, if you don't keep pressure on the system, there's such a tendency to go back to the way it was, right? We want to revert back to what is known and what is familiar. And so there is, a concern, even with school districts that we're working with. How do you keep the focus on a vision and not go back to these old models of education that aren't very effective for any child? And so that's certainly a concern moving forward. How do we prevent that from happening?
Karen, you mentioned, I think what I find scary as a parent and looking at the K through 12 particularly is that sometimes the only place where a child is inspired is in the school. And so if they go home to an under-resourced community or a home where the parents maybe don't look at education or able to value education as their teachers do, it's sad because they need that contact and they need those teachers to inspire them. So I think that's, I look at coming from West Virginia and raising my kids in West Virginia, where you talk about poverty, even in the DC area, and I lived in DC for 7 years. West Virginia has 25%, even in Charleston, the capital city, of students who go home with no Wi-Fi and no resources. And so again, I think teachers are so powerful, and it is sad that the kids don't have that, and we'll see.
But that's a community issue. I feel like cities, state government, county governments, those are solvable problems if people are willing to work together. There are school districts that are putting buses with Wi-Fi, just parking them in communities with no Wi-Fi. There are cities and counties that saying we're going to put hotspots in every place we can throughout this county and city. So, there are solvable problems if people are willing to step up. And I'll tell you, and this is not only for education, think about how many people are working from home now or needing to work from a remote setting. So connectivity is a life issue, and so we need people to come together and really solve it.
I'm hopeful that is one of the things that come out of this, because I'm in Maryland, we're in a really rural area, and that's one of our schools. We deal with a lot of rural schools. That's one of our biggest, the things we hear the most. Well, we can't do this because half of our kids don't have access. Well, you can solve that with a big government grant or project, or you can put that fiber in. And I know that here, I'm friends with a lady who has been trying, the bane of her existence has been trying to get that to happen for some of our more rural areas. That's so true. And Karen, I think you've probably touched on this already. And you talk about community and you talk about how do we maintain the pressure, but do you have any other pieces of advice for a school leader or even a community member leader that you could give, that just, some tried and true wisdom that you might give somebody that wants to get started in moving the needle forward? Yeah,
first of all, I think it's important to emphasize that this what work that we're supporting throughout the country, it's not a fad. So it's not as if this is some new shiny object and this is what we're focused on now. If you go back to the science of learning, what we're talking about is directly aligned with how human beings best learn. And it's not by putting a piece of paper in front of someone and filling in a worksheet. It's giving people content and letting them wrestle with it in a meaningful way, authentic projects, authentic challenges, some ability to have some freedom for how you explore and learn in that, communicating with other people and collaborating. Those are the natural ways that we learn. So if anyone thinks this is a fad, it's totally not. And the research is also clear that these skills are going to be just as important moving forward as they are today. You know, the ability to collaborate, communicate, innovate, problem solve, all those things are extraordinarily important. So I think people that are just entering this work, there's so many great authors and people who've written, researchers who've written about this subject matter. And that's kind of how I started. I started with Tony Wagner's books. You know, The Global Achievement Gap was one of the first ones I read. You know, those are all really, Tony Wagner has an entire series of books that are really helpful. If you'll take, you know, those are good reads on this work. Michael Fullan has a number of books that are really good on this subject matter. And in some cases, a little easier reads than maybe Tony Wagner's, but those are really good ones to tackle. And then Pedro Noguera, who's one of my favorite people, who really talks about equity and the intersection between equity and deeper learning. You can Google him, and there are all kinds of wonderful research articles. And he does a lot with Linda Darling-Hammond, who I think is another extraordinary person in this work. And then if you're really more interested in more of a business book that makes this case too, the one I just mentioned earlier, David Epstein's book, Arrange, has been one of my favorite books I've read this past year. And it makes the case for we have to think about things in a different way. And so those are some things I would do. And then the second thing I would do, if you're a school leader and you are kind of weary of what's been, and you know that there's something better that we could do for all kids, you need to join a network. Find other school system leaders, and they might not be in your region, they might not be in your area, but seek them out. There's some others in your state, or certainly in our national network. You can look online, see our national network. Find them, get to know them. When you seek them out. You could also go to our website. We have a lot of blogs that we've written on this subject that are fairly quick reads, so you can see how we're thinking about these matters, even as it relates to accountability. We have an article on how you would think about accountability in the 21st century. So those are some things that's how I got engaged in this work, is I joined the network back in 2013, and it completely changed the way I was thinking about the work I was leading in my own district.
I am so impressed, Karen. I have to say, we ask this question pretty much on every podcast, and I'm a reader. Toy's a reader. We love having new resources. We're constantly developing training, and I'm going to go out. I think that next book is going to be Arrange for me. And pick
oh my gosh, I love that book.
Yeah,
I love that book.
Both of them that you mentioned. And I love that you gave everybody some very set resources, but also you've been very, very inspiring today. I took a million notes. I feel like I'm going to go out and create a training maybe based on your notes. I'm excited about this. So thank you.
And hey, I think I'd love to learn more about your organization. I think we are kindreds in this work. And I feel like maybe there's some ways that we could support each other, but anything we could do to help you and your organization, a lot of our work, I will say, has been very successful because we align ourselves with we don't think we have to solve everything, but we do think that bringing other partners to the table, we love to collaborate with other organizations, and we've done that effectively for many, many years. And so we always welcome those kinds of relationships.
But yeah, we do align in a lot of different ways. You have a larger network, but we are of the same mind there, and I just love it. This has been so inspiring. I really appreciate you. And we need to kind of wrap up now, but how can folks reach out to you if they want to learn more about Battelle or what you're doing, or Ed Leader 21, all of that stuff?
Sure. So you can go to our website, Battelle for Kids, or bfk.org. And there you'll find a wealth of information about us. There's also contact information. So if you want to email me, you'll also see on there we have just a wonderful team of people. I'm a retired superintendent, or not retired, but a former superintendent. We have many others who've been superintendents and curriculum directors, and we just have a lot of expertise. We're unique in that we have a marketing communications department, an IT department, project manager. So we have a lot of talented people on our team. So go on, you can see all those folks and email anyone, and we're happy to support any school district who wants to explore this further, and we'd love to visit with them. or people can go to our website and access. We do have a podcast called Spark 21, and we have a multitude of different interviews with superintendents from across the nation, with experts in the field. We have one from Tony Wagner. We have one from Stephen Chang from the National Equity Institute. So we have a number of different experts on this matter that we've talked with. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and take advantage of those podcasts at Spark 21.
Awesome. Well, we just really appreciate you joining us today, and so much we could dive into still, but we like to leave those cliffhangers because then we can get you back.
I would love to come back anytime. As you can see, I'm not shy. I love talking about this work. I get so energized about it.
Thank you so much, and we are looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank y'all so much. Really appreciate the time.